Hi, my name's Hannah. This is my consecutive interpreting step 10 for my ASL source text. So I will be voicing interpreting. Today in Deaf Studies, there is a big topic of deaf identity, which is Big D and Little D. Big D is an individual who identifies with deaf culture, deaf pride, most likely is a very good signer and went to a deaf institute. Little D is a person who perceives their deafness as a disability, as hearing loss, most likely uses English or spoken language as their first language and went to an oral school. So one of the main things back then was that deaf institutes and oral hearing schools had very little interaction. Now with technology, there's a lot easier way to get in contact and socialize with other people. But we still see a very strong divide between the two groups. Someone who, for instance, if I was deaf, would walk up to another person who was deaf, and you say, "Oh, we're similar." But what I perceive as deafness to what they perceive as deafness is different. Therefore, I would want to create a divide, a boundary, a difference between you're deaf and I'm Big D, you're Little D, or vice versa, which is causing a lot of problems. And this is causing a lot of many problems because someone who may not identify fully with Big D or Little D, they might be accepted in either groups. So therefore they're standing in the middle not knowing where they belong. Big D and Little D debate and topic is it causes a lot of problems in the deaf culture. One of the main problems, but it causes a lot of and it causes some benefits. One of the main problems is otherization, where someone who is an ASL user, a strong ASL user, it means someone who's deaf who isn't known ASL. Does that make them any less a part of the deaf community and has any more or less deaf culture than the other? Another problem is racial profiling, where you see all these different variances and diversity within the deaf world. But whether someone was born to a hearing family or a deaf family, they may have different opportunities. So some people may say that someone who was born in a more oral and English-using household and went to an oral school is given more opportunities academically and in work and all different situations than someone who isn't. This is causing a lot of tension. The third problem is binary poles, which is where you're creating a distance and of creating a us versus them scenario. So it's deaf versus deaf, signer versus non-signer, big D versus little d, small versus big. Making boundaries between the two groups, which is causing a lot of labels being put on the deaf community, which is very negative. One of the main benefits to the big D, little d identities was that people who aren't labeled themselves with big D usually perceive themselves as a minority, and then are seen themselves as a minority and aren't part of that deaf culture. But someone who is identified with the big D and is very deaf culture, deaf pride, and ASL user can still be successful, and they can still have successful lives, and can show that even though you're a minority, even though there's something different, you can still be fine without an implant or not an English speaking person. So what we need to see within the deaf culture is the diversity. With many minorities, such as the deaf world, you can also see with other minority groups, such as Black people. For instance, there's a phrase in the Black community called Oreo, where a person who is physically perceived as a Black person may act like a white person. Therefore, they might not be accepted widely throughout their cultural group, which causes a lot of judgment and a lot of negative connotations. This can be seen as well with deaf culture. So Jane Fernandez, a woman who ran for deaf president at Gallaudet University, her first language was English. She later learned sign, but her preferred linguistics communication was English. Therefore, she was perceived as not deaf enough. So showing with Jane Fernandez that even if you're not born deaf, or didn't grow up using ASL, or didn't go to a deaf institute, you're not allowed to join a community or be involved or use that identity, which is really negative. It just shows that, your identity is constant. It's not changing. But that's not the case. Identity is always changing. It's something that you grow and process through experiences through your life and in situations that you're in. And you learn that diversity and identities are all different.